Donald, welcome back to the show. Things are much different from when I last spoke with you. Let's deal with this economic situation first. I adumbrated at the beginning of the show in my monologue the many vast price increases in the pipeline or already on the table, on the shelves, and the shortages coming fast down the pipeline and the economic implications of those. All of this was done to punish Russia. How's that going?
Well, it seems to be completely backfiring on the Western powers because, I mean, I think the greatest indicator is how the ruble's doing in relation to the euro and the pound and the dollar right now. It's actually stronger than it was even before Russia began its military operation in Ukraine and the West put these unprecedented sanctions on the country. And now, as you were talking about before, these European countries that have been buying Russian gas for so many years, they have to pay in rubles. This has had a significant strengthening effect on Russia's currency. And the countries that have not actually agreed to do this is the interesting part. They're buying gas from other European countries that are also buying gas from Russia. So it really is not even hurting Russia at all there.
No, but it will hurt Germany if Russia deducts that which it's selling on to other countries from its allocation, which, as I understand, is a decision that is imminent. Do the Russian people feel any pain from these sanctions that are crippling our own economy?
Well, I mean, I have to say here, to be fair, in Russia, there is a high inflation rate, I mean, as in the rest of the world. But I would say that the kind of, what the Western powers expected to happen in Russia just did not pan out. I mean, there are not lines of people waiting for food that's in shortage or deficit in supermarkets. There's no massive economic destruction here. Actually, because of the kind of sanctions that have been leveled by the West against Russia and the kind of overwhelming support that the West has given to Ukraine in terms of weapons and basically doing anything they can to support the Ukrainian effort against Russia's military operation, Russia's rallied around its government. I mean, Putin's administration is very popular right now, and life has not gotten much harder because as a result of these sanctions, no. So that's basically what the outcome has been. I mean, I remember
go on.
Well, I was going to say, I've seen a lot of Western media reports. I've been watching it as well to see what the Western media is talking about the situation here. I remember a couple of weeks back seeing a report about talking about how people are fighting in supermarkets and hoarding food and everything in some crazy anticipation of an economic disaster. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. That's complete fake news.
Now, let me put your American hat on for a minute. Putin's popularity is at an all-time high. He's getting a war bounce. But your president, as an American citizen, is experiencing the reverse. Despite the full mobilization, in an almost military sense, of virtually all of the US media. How do you account for that?
Well, I think that has to do with the fact that basically most Americans can see through what the Biden administration is trying to do here. I mean, they're trying to get this war bounce as well, that especially at a time where the United States is seeing record inflation, at a time where, we're seeing homelessness and unemployment and all these terrible social ills just completely exacerbated in the United States as a result of Biden's choice to give so much money and weapons to Ukraine, Biden's economic choices throughout the pandemic and this whole situation. And then we heard President Biden also say that accuse Russia and the pandemic of the prime reasons for why people should be, the prime people to blame, the prime factors to blame for the rising prices in the United States. But I mean, this has been happening even before the Russia's military operation began, and the pandemic really exacerbated something that was already happening as well. I mean, American economics has been seeing long stagnation for a long time, and people kind of see what Biden's saying as sort of an excuse, sort of diversion of blame that can only be put on the American government itself. I mean, in the United States, people don't have free health care, people don't have free education, there's tons of debt, and people are just dealing with that alongside rising prices. They don't want to hear excuses that it has something to do with Putin or Ukraine,
Well, even if the people were persuaded that it was Putin's fault, there's nothing they can do about Putin. They can't vote Putin out in Peoria, but they can vote the Democratic Party out in the midterms in November. How do you think all this is feeding through in that regard?
Well, I think in terms of the two-party political system in the United States, a lot of people who, I guess, were unhappy with Trump voted for Biden, expecting something to be different. And now Biden's approval ratings are even lower than Trump's ever fell to. So I really think Trump's going to run again and perhaps, end up winning, end up being the second president in American history that was president for 2 terms that were not consecutive. I mean, I personally don't support Trump necessarily. I'm against both parties, but that's the way I see it. I mean, people are even more fed up with Biden than they were with the Trump administration.
Now, the eye-watering amount, I mean, I've lost count of the amount of military aid that Biden has announced, at least. Announcements and delivery are, of course, not always the same thing. And I'm sure that Joe Biden's lost count of it once he got past his 2 hands. But the amount of hardware is actually now leaving the American military inventory empty. For example, 40% of the anti-tank munitions in the Pentagon's stores has actually not just been given to Ukraine, but already used by Ukraine to precious little effect, at least no effect that they've been able to film and photograph and credibly put on the news. So where is all this material that the US is pouring in? Where is it going to, and where will it end up?
Well, I have to say first that I think, as you said, I mean, the Javelin stockpiles of the United States military are being significantly depleted. And who's that profitable for? The corporations that produce the weapons and ammunitions of the United States military. It's completely profitable for the war industry. And that's a good question you bring up. Where is all this stuff going to end up? Well, first, I can tell you that the huge amounts of these munitions are going to the Ukrainian military, and they're using it not to, just fight in this war, but also they've actually ramped up the attacks they've been making on Russian territory. We've seen a lot more missile attacks from the Ukrainian side on Russian territory itself since the US and the UK have been actually increasing the amount of weapons that they're feeding the Ukrainian military. And we even heard from several British officials last week that they were actually egging the Ukrainian military on to use them to attack Russian soil. Now, this to me is a huge provocation. This is really like a clear example of the Western powers potentially bringing the world closer to World War III. You know, it's like it really blurs the lines when British officials are calling for their weapons to be used to attack Russian territory, really blurs the lines between proxy war and full out confrontation. And this is something that the Russian government responded to as well. They said that if if the Ukrainian military uses British weapons to attack Russian soil, and Russian forces become acutely aware of that, then they're going to have to respond with their own measures. They're going to have to carry out strategic attacks on decision-making centers in Kiev, which was previously not on their agenda. So this kind of aimless throwing of weapons, state-of-the-art weaponry into Ukraine, it's really dangerous, not only for the potential escalation of the conflict into something bigger than it is, but also the fact that, there's no way to track these weapons once the war is over. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know where it's going to go. And Ukraine is actually one of the countries in Europe with the largest black market for trafficked weapons. So that's definitely something concerning.
Yeah, the dark web is already selling some of the things that your government and mine have already shipped to Ukraine. Let's switch gear if we can. You are an RT correspondent. That makes you Russian state-affiliated media. I'm not, but I'm also, at least so far as Twitter is concerned, labeled in the same way. But the truth is, neither of us speak for Russia, and neither of us knows what Russia's end game is going to be. But let's speculate for a minute, Donald. We're both intelligent people, and so are the graduates that are listening and watching this show. What does the end of the war look like to you?
Well, to me, I think it's, Russia's intent in this war, I personally think, has been pretty clear throughout the whole time. I think the Western media has tried to distort it. It's tried to make it look like Russia's been is interested in annexing Ukraine or just destroying the Ukrainian nation. That's why we've heard President Biden use the term genocide, which I think is completely out of place and doesn't have anything to do with the situation there. But the way I think we could, the outcome I think we could see from this war that's going on here is a potential for Ukraine, the Ukraine that we knew from before the war, to be split into three possible different places. The first is the People's Republics of Donbass, Donetsk, and Lugansk that Russia recognized the independence of. They are, with the support of the Russian military, they've successfully defended themselves at this point. I think it's pretty clear they're not going to be part of Ukraine after all this is over. Then we're going to have part of the country under the control of of Zelensky's administration. But there's also the possibility of another thing happening that I just want to mention, because last week, Russian foreign intelligence released a report that said that the Polish government, now we don't have concrete evidence that this is going to happen yet, but there are some suspicious circumstances around this. Russian foreign intelligence said that Warsaw, the capital of Poland, the government there is potentially planning to take over some of its territorial claims that it had back in World War I that are currently on Ukrainian territory. Russian intelligence says that Poland is going to potentially send what it calls peacekeepers to western regions of the country under the auspices of defending it from so-called Russian aggression, even though the westernmost regions of the country are the least likely to see any confrontations with Russian troops. And the plan, allegedly, according to this Russian report, is that the peacekeepers that are going to be there are going to try to establish a pro-Warsaw counterbalance government to the Ukrainian nationalists there that are going to have the support of friendly Ukrainian elites there. And apparently the Polish government is going to understand that the country's going to split apart after that, and it's going to take advantage of the chaos to basically reclaim, again, like I said before, the territorial claims that it had all the way back in World War I. So that's according to this Russian intelligence report. And I mean, there is a very suspicious circumstance connected to this. Poland is now conducting these military exercises near the area that people didn't have any idea about just 2 weeks ago. And there were also reports that the government was telling people not to take pictures or videos of Polish troop movements during these quote unquote exercises. So that to me is super suspicious and a possibility for part of the outcome after this war.
And Transnistria, a couple of days ago, it looked like the balloon was about to go up there, with Romania potentially invading Moldova, with or without Moldova's collusion, and both of them invading Transnistria. Tell us briefly a couple of things about that.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't know that much about that. I would like to be more in the loop with what's been going on over there, but I mainly know more about what's been going on with Ukraine and Poland. But I did hear about the attack on Transnistria that has some, nobody really knows who actually was behind it. It just seems like some factions in that region are probably taking advantage of the fact that there's regional instability right next door, so.
Do you think, Donald, that this war will still be going on next May Day?
No. By next May Day, I don't think so. I think the Russian government would probably like to have it done by May 9th. As far as I'm concerned, it looks like the war is pretty much going to stay the way it is, I think, because Mariupol has been liberated by Russian forces. There's, of course, still the Azovstal plant that has the last remnants of these neo-Nazi battalions that have refused to leave. But after that, basically all of Donbass would have been already liberated, which was the goal of the operation, as Vladimir Putin said at the beginning, to defend the people of Donbass that have been terrorized by the Ukrainian government for the past 8 years, and to liquidate these neo-Nazi battalions that have become part of the regular military of Ukraine. And that's pretty much done as well at this point.
In 30 seconds, how are you received on the streets of Moscow as an American?
Completely normally. Nothing has changed for me. A lot of my friends have asked me that question as well in the West, because they've noticed how Russophobia has just exploded over there. But I have to say, it's not the same over here. People still, respect everyone, regardless of nation, the way they did before the war. And there's no sort of anti-Western sentiment just against the people who are from those countries. Of course, people aren't happy with the governments there, that's for sure.
Well, neither are we, and we live here. Donald Courter, thank you very much for joining us.